From deep within our hidden volcano laboratory, a podcast about gaming from the people who bring your games to life. These are your core elements. Core Elements, episode 59, recorded on March 20th, 2014. I am Wes Wilson, and once again, that slacker Spencer Williams has not been able to join us. He was sick last week, but unfortunately some family stuff got in the way this week. We are, however, joined this week by Dana Massey of Rocket City Studios. They are making the game Second Chance Heroes.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. I originally reached out to you because Rocket City Studios was founded in Rocket City, which is Huntsville, Alabama. But you guys kind of branched out a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, we were originally founded with two offices, one in Huntsville, one in St. John's, Newfoundland. And as we wrapped things up, we contracted down to one office. So I actually lived in Huntsville for a couple of years and then moved up here.
So how has your cost of living taken an incredible hit for that?
Yeah, everywhere is more expensive than Huntsville. So. Also, my snow shoveling has increased dramatically.
I can imagine. That doesn't sound pleasant. Now, when studios move around and things like that, how do you maintain any remote services? Do you have any programmers that kind of stay in places, or does everybody have to move?
In our case, unfortunately, a few people moved on. A few people, Americans, visas can be difficult. We moved some people up, and then other people just started working from home is what we did.
Yeah. And you guys have been working on Second Chance Heroes, which right now is out just for iOS, correct?
Correct.
And you're planning on a Steam release. Is there any kind of a vague quarter prediction for when that is going to happen?
I have given infinite predictions, and the honest truth is whenever Greenlight chooses to bless us.
Yeah.
We've been hovering around their top 100 for months and months and months and just never drawn the lucky straw, I guess. So it's done. It's been done for months, actually, as far as the PC and Mac goes. So
really?
We just never chose to release it because if you look at the share of PC gaming, Steam is the be-all and end-all, sadly, for sales on that platform.
Yeah.
And in the case of our game, where it's an online game, we have to maintain an online service. It's not an MMO, but it has an infrastructure kind of like that to host the online portion. We need a certain scale for it to really be viable. And so for that reason, we've held back, and we hope to launch it everywhere, but we need Steam to be one of those places once we go for PC and commit to supporting that.
So that's really kind of interesting. Now, is there any way that you think you can channel what's going on with the iOS release into Greenlight promotion? Have you guys pondered, tapping into the market that's enjoying the game there to make sure you can move it to the other platform?
Well, obviously having some success on iOS helped Greenlight quite a bit, but honestly, Greenlight is a bit of a mystery in how it works. I'm not sure the average fan actually understands how important it is, and then the iOS fan, possibly even less so. So, we put the banners out there and tried to move some bodies between the two of them, and it's helped a little, but it's some of it's also, there's not much rhyme or reason. They seem to Greenlight games that have been canceled half the time, and then not Greenlight games that are actively sitting there just needing, to press 5 buttons to launch. So I honestly can't even begin to understand that process.
And when you released on iOS, you guys decided to go free to play, but then moved it up to 99 cents. What was the thought process there?
Yeah, well, we launched, and it was very successful in terms of critical reviews. Everyone seemed to like it, and in terms of number of downloads and people playing it, all that was great. Unfortunately, the nature of our game, I guess we had hoped it would work with free-to-play, but it didn't work so well. Just the amount of stuff people bought wasn't even close to what we need, given the number of people who were playing it. So the thought was move it to 99 cents and, see if that helps, as we were still featured on the front page of Apple at that point. And that did increase, revenue a little.
Is that a way to kind of game the system? Go in free and then change to 99 cents once you're on the main page?
in, ret- in retrospect, I guess it is. We honestly didn't plan it that way at all. We were a little stunned at how little people will actually spend. Like, we knew the margins are, it's a very small percentage of people spend money, but it was above and beyond that. And some of that isn't really people's fault. It's, our game wasn't necessarily perfect for that style.
Right.
In our case, you could play through a chunk of or pretty much the whole game actually for free. We didn't put any paywalls there, and we were relying on you buying other characters and branching out to a broader experience, which lots of people, and the people who did, to their credit, bought things, but it wasn't it was not nearly enough. So we, rather than just installing like a point where you're just going to lose every time until you buy stuff or something like that, we just decided the 99 cents up front, and then the theory being anyone who's willing to spend $1 is probably willing to spend a couple dollars on characters and stuff after.
Yeah. And how has the response been? Have you seen, like, have you noticed, do you feel that was a good move?
It was a necessary move. I'm not sure. I mean, it helps in terms of percentages. The downside being eventually Apple stops putting you on your front page, so of course your numbers are going to go down from that.
Yeah.
But in talking in terms of percentages, sure, yeah, I don't think you can make a narrative game like we did and then make it free to play. They're just not suited.
And I guess I should have asked you to describe your game. I just sort of walked into talking about it. Why do you tell us a little bit about Second Chance Heroes?
Okay, so Second Chance Heroes, it's a cooperative arcade dungeon crawler type game. In our case, it's set in a semi-modern world, but the major thing we really wanted to do differently is, well, twofold. One, our game doesn't take itself even remotely seriously. And then two, we wanted to go to a kind of older style of arcade dungeon crawl that people haven't seen in a while. Like, something we've been really happy to see in a lot of reviews that people picked up on is, there's a kind of a gauntlet feel to it. It's hordes and hordes and hordes of enemies, and you're just managing crowds rather than fighting individual monsters all at the time. So the cadence of our game is, you fight 30 werewolves and zombies in a hallway, and then you move in and you do a boss encounter and move back into the kind of horde encounters, and that's kind of the cadence we set as you move through. So it's called Second Chance Heroes. You are trying to fight off an apocalypse. The story is that basically our narrator, a guy named high school history teacher named Hubert, believed that the current modern world was not equipped to defeat this apocalypse, so he started cloning historical figures to fight off the apocalypse. So in our game, you play as Abraham Lincoln with a chainsaw, Queen Elizabeth I with a minigun, and so on and so forth. Unlike a lot of role-playing games where you're collecting, swords and armor, in our case, you're collecting flat-out characters who play differently. So Queen Elizabeth is entirely different than Abraham Lincoln, and as you move through the game, you unlock them, or in the iOS version, you pay a couple dollars to get a new one. And then the other thing you collect as you move through the game are these relics, which are preposterous things. For example, King Henry VIII's reinforced toilet seat will summon a giant toilet from the sky that will grab all the monsters nearby, hold them tight, and then blow them up. So the idea, these are extra active abilities. Everything in our game you collect it's almost never statistical. It's always active. It's something you press a button, something happens. Queen Elizabeth can summon a flag from the sky that when people gather around it heals them. And, the toilet seat is, well, the toilet seat. So on and so forth.
That's really awesome. I think there's something about Dada gaming that makes me very happy. And I think it boils down to the old Duke Nukem / Serious Sam side of things, where you're very aware of the medium that you're doing this gameplay in, and it adds an extra level of snark through the third wall.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, a lot of games, obviously, they're about saving the princess or fighting off the demon, and actually our game has all of those things, but they're always just as stupid as humanly possible. So, you fight through this dilapidated mall, and you eventually fight the Mallrog, which is a giant teddy bear made of mall trash that has come together at the bottom of the mall for you to destroy it. And so, we actually, you have to fight to save a princess at one point, but she's actually run off into the hobo's fungus mines to save her pet walrus, who is turned into a robot laser walrus. I mean, there is no attempt at all to take this seriously, and that's what that's kind of the difference, I think, in our game and a lot of other games is not all of them. You've named a couple great examples of games that do this similar thing, but too often I think games are just very dire and serious. And we just wanted to make a game where you sit down and have fun, which is, one reason we put it on iOS is while it's a top-down dungeon crawler, I guess I forgot to mention it's also cooperative. You can play with 3 or 4 people depending on the platform. We put it on iOS because technically it's actually a pretty impressive iOS game. Most iOS games don't look like this. It looks like a console game. So that was one of the reasons we went there first. Also, Apple is infinitely easier to get your game on the iOS than it is on Steam, as we've learned. So that's why we went there first, and then but honestly, as I said, we learned while it's an impressive game on iOS and reviewed well, and lots of people enjoyed it, you can't charge $14 for a game on iOS. It just no one will pay that, especially if they don't know your franchise or something like that. Yeah. So that was kind of why we went free to play, because honestly to us, we'd rather just charge you $14, let you play the whole thing, and unlock the characters as part of gameplay as opposed to paying a couple dollars here or there. And that is our hope when we do get to PC, is that's how we can do it. And we're also working, I guess I mentioned as well, on the PlayStation 4 version as well.
Excellent.
Which, by the way, PlayStation 4 infinitely easier to deal with than Steam.
That is so bizarre too. That makes no sense. Like when everybody thinks of the ease of PC gaming, they mention Steam, and yet this experience for certain companies has proven quite difficult, and it's weird to me. Yeah,
well, I don't blame them. They don't know who we are, obviously. We're just one of 10 million companies who want to be on their platform. So I get that, and I get that they have to have a process, because I can't imagine how many emails they get a day about their games. It just happens that this one hasn't worked very well for us, which is partly our fault too, for not sending enough people there to vote, I guess. But
yeah. Well, do you think there's also like a nepotism thing? Like, did you ever think about hiring someone who already had a game on Steam? Like they could, is that part of the thought process in getting on Steam?
Well, I will say, once you get on Greenlight, you will get no end of publishers who call you basically being like, hey, we can help you with that. Yeah. But they can't really help you with that. The irony is, once you're on there, you're stuck on there. I think one said to us, the worst thing about your game is that it's on Greenlight already. Yeah. If you're not on Greenlight, you can circumvent it. And not circumvent it, it's just they'll put publishers they've already worked with up there, which makes sense. So if this publisher has already been through the process or already got games on Steam, they can just put your game on there by publishing it. Now they charge you an arm and a leg to do so, of course. Yeah. Which is tough for indie developers, right? Because every dollar is precious, and you have to give away half of them to a publisher just to get around Steam. Yeah. Greenlight, that isn't good. So it's ironically, I think, what was meant to be a fan system, and I guess Steam or Valve themselves have acknowledged this isn't really working, but what was meant to be a system that put the power in the hands of players has kind of put the power in the hands of publishers. Ironically, it's brought them back into the equation in a way where they were supposed to be cut out, because you need them to get around this voting process. And then the other problem is, by nature, like if you think about it, who's really going to vote on a Greenlight game? You're going to be a pretty hardcore gamer, and I think that hasn't helped us as well. A lot of the people who look at our game just go, nope, zombies are in it, which fair enough, but if you actually look at our game, it's not really a zombie game at all. But you can see them, so therefore, nope, zombies, and you're terrible. So we didn't make a hardcore game. If our game had looked like Minecraft, I think we would have been through Greenlight a year ago. They seem to self-select a certain kind of game, which meets their interests, and fair enough. But the kind of person who I think would actually enjoy our game and play our game and ultimately buy our game, they don't know what Greenlight is. It's 10 layers deep in Steam.
Well, and I've always kind of wondered, I vote on particular games. Like, I get directed to games. I wonder what kind of person shops Greenlight. I mean, Steam is obsessive about collecting information. They have to know exactly what kind of gamer is using the Greenlight system and just kind of wandering around and voting on stuff. I wonder who that person is.
Yeah, well, they've set up with the yes/no, right? And then it just takes you to the next game. So you just go, you look at 2 seconds of a trailer, yes, no, all the way down the list. One thing I was surprised about is, and it doesn't seem to be us from everything I've seen written online, the amount of people who will vote no on games. Like, no, you cannot sell your game. We do not like you. just don't know why you would. Like, why would you spend your time in a system telling people, no, you're not allowed to sell your game on this platform?
Yeah.
It's a strange behavior, but they do.
It sounds,
So,
it's kind of like people getting on a YouTube video and saying, this video sucks. Well, why do you got to put that comment on there, you know?
Yeah, I once wrote an article ages ago at a previous job, and it annoyed some people, and probably rightfully so, but nonetheless, it annoyed some people, and I had a column at the time, and for the next, 8 weeks, all these people would go to my article and type /boycott on my column, which was like, okay, you just clicked 6 pages and have a Google alert to accomplish that.
Well, we will talk a little bit more about Second Chance Heroes and your work, but first... Lab notes. So, talking about serious games, Titanfall is a serious game, and I mocked it beforehand, and I've said this before, the hype, I did not understand it, and now I get it. It is my go-to game now. It is what I am looking for. When I pick up my computer, I'm like, can I get some Titanfall in? And I don't really know exactly what has pulled me into this, because I do not like military shooters on the whole, because they take themselves so seriously and everything is such a big deal and everything is really epic and big in this game and it takes itself super seriously. And there's this terrible gun unlock system and this weird card system and all kinds of strange things that would normally turn me off, and I can't put it down. I get brutally slaughtered over and over and over again. I get killed in the cheapest ways possible. People will snipe me and I'll be like, filthy camper. And it's baffling to me. And yet I'm enjoying it. And I think the key to it is I feel like I'm winning even when I'm losing. Something about it is making me feel even my losses are enjoyable. And maybe I'll get over that, because I didn't get that in games like Battlefield and Call of Duty. I didn't feel like I was winning when I lost there. I just felt like I was robbed of a chance to play the game. And yet I feel, and it might be this super cheaty smart pistol they put in the game. I don't know if you're aware of this idea, but there is a pistol in the game where if you're running around and your reticle hits anyone and they're within range, you'll target them. And you can target multiple people, pull the trigger, and it'll shoot as many bullets as necessary to kill those people. Now, killing players is harder than killing the NPCs, but it feels, I don't know, like it's like a lifeline to me. It's like, I know everybody else is really good at the game, but even you can kill people if you're lucky enough. Have you tried it at all? Yeah,
I've had a somewhat similar experience to you in that I really like it and I'm really bad at it. So, I get exactly where you're coming from, because I'm not as against military shooters as you, but they're not my go-to game.
Yeah.
But Titanfall, especially, I guess I played the beta weekend and then a little bit after it came out, and it's weirdly addictive. I mean, I think you mentioned all those weird warts on it, and it has them, but it's just so fun in the second to second when you're actually running around. It feels really perfect. Like jumping off the walls, when I saw that on, in a video, it just seemed like, okay, that's their gimmick. Great, they have wall running, but it actually just works perfectly when you're going, right? You press the button, you're running on walls. You don't even think about it. And it took me about 3 seconds, and I was running on walls all the time. It was fine. And so they really, really polished just how it feels in the moment. And then I think the other thing that makes it good is no matter how bad you are at Titanfall, every 2 minutes you press V, a Titan falls from the sky, and you get to step on people. So you're going to get a couple kills.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. And I stated this in the last episode. There's also 4 games in it. There's the Titan versus Titan game. There's the human versus human game. There's the human versus Titan game and the Titan versus human game. And all of them are instrumental. You can't ignore any of them. But if you're frustrated by one of those games, you can change. You just hop in your Titan or hop out of your Titan. And then there's all kinds of other weird little details. I love, okay, after you lose the match, there's a whole extraction game where you're trying to make it to the extraction point for no real reason other than to do it.
What you've just described also, it helps make the game, as you said, you feel like you're winning even when you're losing, right? Because one of the reasons you just got to run to your ship. I've only ever made it out successfully once, but so sometimes you just lose twice. But there's a chance for the losing side to win in a way. Like, when that ship gets away, if I won, I feel disappointed at the end of the match, weirdly. And if I'm on that ship and it gets away, and I've lost the match, I feel like I won the match. So it gives you a weird role where percentage-wise, more people are winning than losing. Yeah, and they're good at the MMO crack of every time you finish a level, you see a progress bar go along. Yes, which is, that's as much as you know what they're doing. You can't help but watch the progress bar and hope for the new thing. Yeah, like you mentioned, the unlocks, they're kind of obnoxious, but at the same time, I'm sitting there like, I'd really, really like that new sniper rifle, so I'm watching the bar, and I'll play one extra game if I'm really close to the end and things like that. So I get it. I also, and you mentioned the 4 games too. You can't, if you want to be good at it, you got to be good at all 4 of them. But if you just want to play it a little, you really just have to get good at one of them, and you can feel like you're contributing. Like, I am useless with the guns as a regular player. I'm a pretty useless Titan, I think. I just kind of wander around until someone kills me. But I've become alarmingly good at killing Titans on foot. Yeah. Like hiding behind things, shooting with my rockets, and having them blow up. That's awesome. So when you come to the end screen, you always see me with my 10 deaths and my 2 kills and my 7 Titan kills. Awesome. And that's just it. Like, there's something for everybody. I have found that even when I am no good at killing players, I can run around and kill lots and lots of minions. I get my smart gun and I head for clumps of minions because I know that will help. There are ways to help the game that don't necessarily involve getting direct player hits. And I also love they've got a random game mode where you can get in and it'll shuffle it up. One might be attrition, one might be capture the flag, one might be last Titan standing. And that way, if you're sucking at one mode, you get shoved into another one shortly afterwards. And they did it. I am extremely frustrated that this game that I thought was going to be more of the same actually kind of tapped into some good things. And I hope the press for it continues to go well. I had someone tell me the other day, oh, the game just kind of fell off the radar. And I'm like, what? It seems omnipresent to me, and I hope it stays that way for a while. Yeah, I think people just, it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to game media, they'll move on to the next thing, of course. Yeah. But these games, especially shooters, tend to have a pretty good lifespan in them, so I can't imagine this one's going away anytime soon. Yeah. So the second thing I've been playing, and it's weird because pretty much all I've been playing is PvP lately, is I've been playing some Smite again. Now, the Game Vid Expo and the Smite $100,000 tournament is in Atlanta next weekend. I kind of wanted to make sure I was up to snuff in case I got pulled in on any exhibition matches. And I've been focusing on my tanky tank, which is Bacchus, because I love the whole bouncy burpee thing. And then I've been also doing some Poseidon because I love the Meiji thing. And I've been loving it. It has really been scratching itches again. And I've talked about this before, that Smite is a good palate cleanser for me. If I'm tired and I want to start off my night with some gaming, I'll hop into a game of Smite real quick and it'll get my energy up, and then I can play whatever I want and feel awake for it after that. But in the short run, it's really good at priming me for a night of gaming. And I really can't recommend this enough. Smite is being released next week. It is coming out of beta, which is funny because they just released a God this week, and yet they say they're coming out of beta next week. But it is a really supreme PvP experience if you like the idea of MOBAs but don't necessarily like the way they play. Check out Smite. It is well worth it. So what have you been playing lately? Well, it's funny you mentioned Smite because while I haven't played that, I have I like that company. I like the Global Agenda an alarming amount. But I also have a soft spot for anybody who will, we did historical characters. They went off and did gods, so that's kind of cool. Unfortunately, I've been horribly addicted to Dota too. So,
well, no, but that's the like connoisseurs version right now. That like when I think about Dota 2, I think about all the old people from original Dota and from Heroes of New Earth. That's the crowd that seems to be heading towards Dota 2.
Yeah, the breakdowns. I mean, obviously League's a bit bigger, and there's a lot of games like Smite that are doing pretty well. It's hard to tell, who's which crowd goes to which. All of the crowds are kind of evil at times, but it's those games just push those buttons in people's brains and send them into flying rage. I think they're like. It's got to be the same thing that causes people to freak out when they're driving. It's you do one thing wrong, there's just everyone gets the idea of the right way to do everything, and they just have to do it that way. And if you meet someone random on the internet who does it differently, they are the dumbest person in the history of the world, and then people yell at each other. So it's kind of a social experiment watching it sometimes. The things people will say to each other in a Dota game with voice chat. Even it used to be people would type and there was an anonymity to that. Now you actually hear their voice as they're just yelling curse words at you. So that part of it's fascinating to me because I don't take it all that seriously, which probably makes people hate me more. But no, it's a fascinating game. All of them are fascinating, and it's kind of strange to see the breakdown and the tribalness between all of these games that are bluntly almost the same thing when you really look at them, right? Yeah. They obviously there's differences, but the people will get really religious about whether or not trees can be destroyed in the game because that's it's a difference between League and Dota, and that is like the most important thing you could possibly talk to them about when you talk about that game, which is to me is just that's I'm sure it matters, but really? Jeez, that's the thing.
How do you feel that you've developed as a Dota player? Do you feel do you feel like you were ever near the learning curve, or have you always felt behind it? And do you feel yourself getting closer or farther away from the competency peak?
It's tough to say, I guess. I mean, obviously it was terrible like everyone is, and then managed to stick with it. So in that respect, I've clearly improved. The irony is, I think, as you get better at the game, you lose more, which makes very little sense, but it seems to be the way it is, because now you can see the rankings of people, and you start playing with better people who are, sometimes you can look them up on like Dota Buff and see how many games they played, and I'll play against people who have like 10,000 games. So God, why did that happen? No wonder I died in 9 minutes. But so I don't know. On one hand, sure, I guess I'm getting better at it, but I'm never going to be good at it. You can kind of, it's like playing a sport. You kind of know within a few weeks whether or not you have that in you, and I definitely do not. Although related, did you watch that movie they put out? I think it was yesterday, wasn't it, or the day before?
No.
So Valve did a whole documentary on the professional players, which was free to play. The movie, I think it's free on Steam now, actually.
Oh wow!
And yeah, it's ironic. We spent the first part of this talking about how much I dislike Greenlight, and now I'm talking about the game by Valve I play and watching the movie. But nonetheless, they put out a whole documentary. It's fascinating, really well done movie, actually, forgetting just the Dota part of it. But it actually, I think one thing that people talk about esports developing, and you've actually got it now in North America where people are becoming fans of certain players and stuff like that. But unlike real sports, there's still a disconnect, I think, because you don't see them. You see Slark or something, when they're playing a character, you don't see them. Whereas if you're watching hockey or baseball or something, you see your favorite player running around. And this movie is an interesting step in kind of humanizing these people and making them into real people. And it was just fascinating to see the things they give up and the family pressures. And, there's one person who's in this movie whose family didn't approve at all of him being a professional gamer, which, as someone who grew up to be a game designer, I can totally get that, because I was told to go outside and stop playing video games a lot too, but then, eventually made a living out of it. And it's interesting to see, and they're trying to, I guess part of their motivation has to be to try and create or foster that community around, like the you can actually be a fan of it. And like, I play hockey. I'll never be in the NHL, but I'll watch hockey and then I'll go play hockey. And I guess Dota's kind of developing a similar thing for a lot of people where they'll play it. They'll play 10 games a weekend, but then they'll actually sit there and watch the championship for $100,000, like the one you have for Smite this weekend, right?
Yeah. And let me, but are online games, like I when I try to imagine playing Dota 2 like a football game, like, okay, let's grab the football and throw it around in the yard, play a touch game. What are the differences in the dynamic there? Like, I think that, I think you would tend to see more people getting frustrated with like, or thinking they could be excellent at a game like Dota, where, like, if you go out and toss the football around, I don't think people are as hardcore about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's like the illusion that and maybe this is part of the appeal too, there's the illusion that you could be that guy who wins that $1 million, right? There's nothing to stop you being that good. I know I'm not going to be a professional hockey player because I can't skate that well. I can't shoot that well. There's certain physical limitations you can just flat out know it's not going to happen. Or in the case of sports, obviously, I'm too old, right? If you're not a superstar at 16, you're never going to go on. So you kind of grow out of it. With Dota, I guess maybe there's an illusion that anybody could do it. But if you've ever watched someone who's truly good at one of these games when they play, like, just watch their hands on the keyboard. They actually have a whole sequence in the movie where they're showing one of the really good players and how, it looks like he's playing the piano, basically. And I've noticed this before with other people who are just better than me at these kind of twitchy games. They can just micromanage and follow so many more things than other people can. It's a skill, and not unlike a sport. I mean, there's the illusion that because you can just load it up and go, that you might one day be that good, and maybe some people will be, but I think you eventually learn, if you're being honest about it, that no, you either have that kind of innate skill or you don't.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I notice how many times I fail to type in my password correctly, and I wonder, you know what I mean? It's like 8s and 6s in passwords are, really in particular kind of troublesome. For some reason, I can't ever seem to hit them right, and I wonder what that's like, as a professional gamer. Like, I don't think I could ever really do it because while with two hands on the keyboard, I can type really well. With one hand, picking it up and moving it, I don't have the spatial awareness to always hit the keys correctly. So
I have exactly the same problem. Like, I think it's hard to even say without looking, but it uses QWER for your main abilities, and then the bottom of the keyboard ZX CV for your, like, well, and some others, but for your your items. And I'm fine with the QWER. I can use my abilities when I want to use them. I never hit the wrong buttons, or rarely. But when I have time to use the items, if the items are in the bottom row of my inventory and map to ZXCV, and I suppose I could remap them, or ZXC, I guess. I just cannot use them on demand. I have to stop what I'm doing and look at the keyboard and press the button.
I'm terrible at punching anything in Titanfall. Like, all the people who kill me in hand-to-hand make me so angry. I'm like, my finger doesn't bend that well for the C.
Well, I know there was an interesting line in the movie. They actually mentioned how one of them said something along the lines of, if you're older than 26, you don't have the potential to be good at this because you won't have the reaction times and the I mean, some of it's probably life too. If you're older than 26, you probably have other responsibilities than playing Dota all day. But there's probably something to the reaction times and such. Like, to be really good at some of these characters, you have to precisely time something down to the millisecond and know exactly when to do it and how long it takes, and memorize how long it takes, or memorize how much damage your thing does, and then press the button exactly the right moment and be able to judge the bar. Like, there's just so much to it. And you watch the professional players, like when they stream on Twitch and other things, they're like clicking like 14 times a second. I physically can't click that fast. Yeah. They're jumping around the map, just looking at things, and like they're thinking about 12 things at once. And I'm lucky if I can remember where my character is during a fight. So
yeah, I catch myself like in some games going, wait, where's my cursor?
Yeah, exactly. So if you ever asked yourself, where's your cursor, odds are you're not going to be a professional football player.
So have you been playing anything else?
Let me see. There's been Hearthstone here and there. I don't know how much of that you've played, but it's weirdly, it's it's got that same feeling you had with Titanfall, where you're like, I want to hate this, but then you play it and you just really, really like it for no apparent reason. So fair amount of Hearthstone, and then my usual addiction in all things gaming is whatever the current edition of Football Manager is.
Really?
Yes, I have a weird range of video games. So I'm playing a MOBA, a shooter, a card game, and a spreadsheet simulator.
That's pretty awesome.
Yes, so I'm the one person in North America who probably cares about Football Manager, but it is the best game ever.
Eureka! Ow! So this first story kind of doesn't really have a focus. I thought this article was very interesting, and so I wanted to bring it up and talk about it a little bit. What particularly interested me, the name of the article is from Polygon. It says, "How Razer is Reinventing the Gaming PC, One Insane Project at a Time." And in particular, what I was impressed by is they're working on a modular PC design. The idea is you have a chassis that you can then buy things that just kind of plug into it. And then when you want to replace your video card or your, or anything, you just kind of pull things out and put them in. And it's very strange looking, and it's very odd. It's a very odd project to step into. It's very stylistic. And it reminds me of the whole Steambox thing. It's one of those projects that is ambitious, but you wonder what the market for it is. Did you have,
Sorry?
Did you have a chance to look over this article at all and see the design of it?
Yeah, it's kind of looks like something off a Borg spaceship, but it's
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I could see where it would, I might actually be the kind of person who would use something like this, because, well, what you just described, a hardcore tech guy would say is just, that's how computers already work, because it is essentially.
Yeah.
There's a barrier to entry there. I will not open my box.
Really?
If it's broken, I take it to someone else and they fix it. I refuse to learn hardware. If it is more complicated than a USB port, I can't do it.
That's fascinating.
It's just
I build all my boxes from scratch. I go when it's time for me to build a computer, I go and I do a few weeks worth of research on Ars Technica. I look at their budget and Godbox builds. I then go to Tom's Hardware and I look at hierarchy charts and see what I can afford to replace. And then I do some random I do some shopping, and then basically I do a big Newegg order.
Yeah, and I haven't in a while. I'll at least have gotten better than this. I buy a Dell or something.
Yeah.
And move on. But there's a lot more people like me than like you, probably. So if they can actually bring that assemble your own thing, because you probably spend, well, I'm sure you actually save money, but you spend a ton of money on pieces for computers. If they can actually make that work, where people who won't unscrew a computer case start buying new video cards and stuff and putting them in themselves because it's just plug and play, they'll make a ton of money.
Yeah.
That said, it's tough to make the not hardcore people into hardcore people. So yeah. I don't know, it'll be an interesting thing.
One other thing that they talked about in this article is Razer's working on a wearable smartband called Nabu. NABU, and they've got evidently a lot of really cool things going on with it. So, and then later on in the article, they mention like a bunch of different projects they're working on from their think tank, and they all seem very strange and disconnected. And that kind of think tank idea is very appealing to me, and it makes me want to buy Razer products. If they're just kind of dabbling and making cool things for the sake of making cool things, that seems like what we should be doing in life.
Yeah, I'll admit, before you sent me this article, I thought Razer just made really, really ugly mice. Yeah. So I'm surprised to see all of this stuff. I used to have a Razer mouse. I guess it was fine, but it was just, there are buttons everywhere. And to see all this weird stuff they're doing, that's not a lot of companies go that wide. So hopefully they have some success with it, because a lot of this stuff looks fun.
Yeah. One interesting thing that I did notice in the article is they talked about all this think tank stuff they're doing, and Razer has a good relationship with Valve, but they're not building a Steam box and not planning on really supporting it. And I thought that was very interesting and very telling. So anyway, I'll provide a link to that in the show notes, and you can, as always, you can find the show notes at coreelementshow.com. The next thing I think might appeal to you, and I thought was really interesting, the Unreal Engine has unveiled they're going to have an inexpensive dev option. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to charge like $20 a month, I think it was, or $19.99 a month.
I thought it was 50, but I might be wrong. Anyway.
Okay. Anyway, maybe I was looking at the student version or something like that. But anyway, they're going to charge a super cheap like subscription fee to have dev access to Unreal Engine, and then a microscopic royalty fee for using it in your game. I think for a $10 game, they were saying it would be 50 cents a copy for using the engine.
It's 5%.
Wow, it's okay, and it's tiny, in my opinion. But I think this is an excellent option. And somebody said this was a response to that CryEngine was doing something similar. But I thought I would get your opinion on this. Does this kind of move make you more interested in doing stuff with the Unreal Engine? I
think ultimately you have to pick. I mean, it makes them a plausible option in some cases for some smaller developers, because if it was $100,000 or something like it used to be, no one's going to use it, of course. So yeah, it makes them, I guess, an option for smaller developers, and I have no particular problem with the 5% and the subscription. It is more than you think, and to some extent, I think microscopic's not the right word. 5% of your revenue is still a fair amount of money, potentially, if the game is successful, right? Or a fair amount of the money you could have made. That said, I guess it makes it more plausible. It's just a question of picking the right engine for your game, and Unreal Engine makes certain kind of games really well, and if you're making one of them, you should look at it. And if you're making a different kind of game, then you shouldn't. I think picking one over the other based on the name is secondary.
Yeah. Well, and that's something to consider, though. Like in my thought process, when I think about 5% of your revenue, I think about how much would I pay someone to build an engine for me.
Yeah. We just went through the second chance is we built that engine. It's all our own. A lot of people assume it's Unity because it kind of looks that style, but It's not. It's something we built from scratch, and I will tell you that's not a very time-effective project. You want to make a game relatively quickly.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, like, I talked with this with a guest a few weeks ago. It seems to me that if you could take this whole underlying engine thing and distribute it, you could reduce the engine costs for everybody. And that seems like an appealing move as we grow and increase complexity with games that are coming out. But at the same time, if you want your game, he pointed out, if you want your game to have a unique look and feel, you're still going to have to create the assets for it. If everything just drew off common assets, gaming would get really boring really quick.
Yeah, from an art perspective, you've got to go your own way, really. I mean, depends on the game, I guess, but you can't just pull them out of a box. The engines, yeah, you could make an Unreal game look like a Unity game, look like another kind of game, right? Like, people think our game was Unity, but it's not at all. It was a completely different thing. So that's just kind of the reality of making a game, I guess. You kind of got to do your own art if you want to look remotely original.
Right. So my next article that I wanted to point out is, and this is just me expressing something that I enjoyed. I have recently discovered the movement that is 2048. Basically, Gabriel Cirilli, if that's how you pronounce it, created a little web game called 2048, and it has evidently been making its round in the hacker circles, and people have been writing new versions of it. The basic premise of it is pretty simple. You use your 4 arrow keys. You've got a 5x5 grid, and you slide things around, 4x4 grid, and you slide things around. And it is really addicting, and it will eat your life. And what got my attention is there's a Doge 2048 version, and every single little Doge dog that gets created is better than the previous one. And then the other thing is somebody made a 2048 Flappy Bird game.
Of course they did it.
Where you hit buttons and your little 2048 box has to get through the anyway, yeah. I will provide links to those in the show notes, and it will eat your day. I'm big on the news today for some reason. Everything seemed appealing to me. I guess it's because I'm in a good mood. Sony has revealed Project Morpheus for the PlayStation 4, which is their virtual reality headset, and the Oculus Rift 2 development kit got released or announced, and both are getting really, really good reviews. I had a lot of my YouTube friends who said nothing but good things about the original Oculus Rift, and it was appealing to me, but I never really thought I would buy in. But this appears to be a thing now, and I think I want one now.
Yeah, if you ever tried something, like, they're always really impressive, especially you go to a show in a controlled environment and try something out. It's always really cool, but no one's actually, maybe the PlayStation 4 will do this, found a way to get in everyone's house, though, right?
Yeah.
That's the trick.
Well, and it's kind of fascinating. I never would have, this is one of those things that I never thought would have taken off. Having a big clunky headset on your head seems like, it seems very Wii balance patty to me.
Well, and it hasn't, to be fair, I guess it hasn't taken off yet, right? They still haven't found a way to get them into people's houses on a regular basis. Like, how many people do you know with an Oculus Rift?
That's a good point.
Now, if PlayStation's doing it, then yeah, maybe that has a much higher chance. I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of goes the novelty way. Like you said, the Wii, everyone thought it was the coolest thing ever, and everyone owns a Wii, and I bet you don't know anyone who's turned on their Wii in the last year.
Shut up. I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my son's getting lots of Wii Lego games lately. So.
Okay, yes. Okay. I have a Wii, and then it's still in a box, and
yeah.
I know that's true for a lot of older people.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I haven't tried either of these, so I'm not saying they're good or bad. I have not a clue.
Yeah.
And they're always really cool. These kind of things, when you try them, they're always really cool. So they can find a way to make a affordable one that goes into people's houses and some actual interesting software for it. Great. It's more stuff we can play with, right?
Yeah.
More stuff we can develop for.
And I think the Oculus Rift pricing was going to be $350. And that doesn't seem too bad to me. I'm not sure on the Sony Morpheus pricing yet, but I will provide some links in the show notes for people who are curious about these things. But all in all, that doesn't seem too bad to me. And I think, and the fact that there are already games like Crysis and Team Fortress 2 that are supporting this particular hardware is appealing to me. And if I can find a way to convince my wife this is important for my professional development, then I too will have an Oculus Rift 2. And lastly, because I have talked about this every step of the way, SimCity offline mode has been released. SimCity has finally fessed up. You can play this offline. It's available, and I might have to try it out just to prove to myself it could do it all along. I've
never understood. I had some sympathy for them a little. Our game is online, and we, for the longest time, didn't have an offline mode. But, when we decided to put in an offline mode, it took about a week.
Yeah.
So I'm not that technically inclined, so I can't say, but I have no idea how it took them a year to make it work offline.
Yeah.
They had to have been doing some weird stuff or just weren't working on it, which is probably more likely.
Yeah.
Inspiration.
So, what is the weirdest character that didn't make it into Second Chance Heroes?
The weirdest. We only actually made one that didn't make it in, in terms of actually built them, played them. That was Annie Oakley, but she wasn't terribly weird. That was the problem. She was just a girl with 2.6 shooters that could shoot people. So we took her out because she wasn't that interesting. The weirdest concepts we had were we had a William Shakespeare who was kind of a cross between William Shakespeare and Puck from Midsummer's Night's Dream. So
nice.
Like he had little tiny bee wings, and he was just concept art on a whiteboard. I think I tweeted out the image ages ago. I can find it for you if you want it. So Josh, our creative director, he drew it up on the whiteboard one day, and this was our version of Shakespeare. And he would fly around with a shotgun, and we didn't really go much further than that, but that would have been the single weirdest thing we would have done. We also strongly considered H.G. Wells as a kind of like Futurama-style severed head sitting inside a flying saucer, flying around. We never got to him. He would have been actually easier to do with less animation, but he just never quite made the cut in terms of a name recognition. So there were a lot of them. I mean, honestly, there's 100 and so on our list, and hopefully we get to some of them. But the ones that I think have gone over the best were the weird ones, and that might be don't want to say a regret, but the more on-the-nose characters we did are a little, they're functionally necessary maybe, but they're a little less interesting, and we should have gone for the silly every time.
Yeah.
The weirdest one we did that did make it in is Mary Curie, I'd say, and she's literally a little old lady with a walker, and she just kind of zooms around with her walker really quickly. She shoots laser beams out of her eyes.
That's pretty awesome. So who did you work for, who did you work for before Rocket City?
So I've been kind of jumping back and forth from developer to writer over the years. So previous jobs, I guess I ran MMORPG.com for a number of years. So if you know that site, it's all about MMOs. I'd worked previously on an MMO with many of these same people, which never actually came out, but Wish it was called, if anyone remembers it. That was also partly developed in Huntsville, which was just a straight fantasy MMO. Unfortunately, we had the foresight to go almost finish an MMO right around the time WoW launched. So.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was a fun project, and it was cool, and had a lot of people liked it, but it wasn't the right time for that. It was kind of a more Ultima style sandbox type world game.
Let me ask you about MMO development.
Sure.
It seems to be one of those things that if you do it, I mean, there's so many MMOs that just seem to start and then never finish. Are these concept restaurants? Are the odds of them actually making it to the end just extremely astronomical? Or
you mean in terms of they get developed and then they don't get launched?
Yeah.
Well, there's a few things. I mean, in our case, this was 2004, 2005. So there's a certain cost to launching a game back then that doesn't really exist, putting it in a box. That's no longer printing CDs. So, it has to be worth it, the investment, obviously. Then on top of that, I think a lot of MMOs are really appealing to a certain kind of gamer, and a lot of indie projects start with, we're going to make an MMO, but it's got to be the most complicated possible thing you could make. All the server architecture to make that actually function is completely insane. So unless you're a really high-end developer, you're not going to get that right. And I think a lot of people just run out of patience when they start working on them. So you see a lot of concepts or a lot of teams come together, and it's just way more work than they anticipated. So those kind of things happen. The other part is, if not done carefully, they're not all that fun, right? You can just end up with a big empty world. And so maybe, I guess, they hit a wall there too, where they just realize, the game wasn't really as fun as they thought, or it's a giant tech demo or something like that. So I don't know, it does seem to attract that type though, where it's everyone wants to make one. Everyone thinks it's the best idea ever, but no one, obviously a few people have, but it's very difficult to do that in a way that's fun. And then even today, if you're launching an MMO, there's a lot of costs that don't exist if you're making a more casual game, right? Because you have to keep servers online forever and have customer support and all this stuff that just doesn't exist with, making a Flappy Birds type game.
Yeah. It's kind of baffling too, because I do think a lot of people just think that making a world is enough for an MMO.
Sure.
They often kind of forget. I kind of quit playing a lot of MMOs because I didn't feel like they were investing me. I felt like it was just, walk around the corner, kill some bees,
Yeah, that's kind of what burned me on it a little too. I mean, with Wish, we made that mistake a little. I think we didn't make enough of the game. We made a world, but we didn't make enough of the game to really sustain it. And then that happened, you sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but
Sorry.
you get into them and they're so big and there's so many parts, but you also run into this weird, I guess, Star Wars had this problem, and it's the best way I can explain it, is they just kind of said they didn't care. You would just do your story. We don't care that 20,000 other people are doing this story too. But it's like it holds it in your face and breaks that illusion. Like if you're playing the Knights of the Old Republic game, you don't care that I'm also playing the Knights of the Old Republic game. But if you play the MMO, I see you running by.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me that this isn't my story. I'm not the hero of this world.
Yeah.
And it's very, very tough to make. You can't make someone the hero of the world because you have to make to make money, you have to have hundreds of thousands of players who think they're the hero.
Yeah.
You can't have one guy who's like, I'm awesome, because he's still only paying you $10 a month.
Yeah.
So that's the trick, and no one's really ever solved that to some extent. I mean, that's why we ended up with the kind of, I guess, some people derisively call them, theme park games or whatever, which, like, I really actually liked the Star Wars MMO. It was super fun from a single player perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I just played the missions, and then I moved on when the missions were done. And WoW is kind of a theme park. You're just kind of going from area to area doing your thing, but it still has that, for me at least, that element of someone walks by you and reminds you you're not actually that important.
Right. Well, and it's funny. I was kind of surprised. Elder Scrolls Online is doing that whole "you're the hero" thing with their tutorial, and how you get into the game. You are the important person. And I did laugh because I'm like listening to my wife, finding out she's the very important person at the computer next to me. And I don't know, it's weird. Like, can you create that balance of making people feel important, but putting them as cogs in a bigger wheel, a bigger machine? I don't know.
And that's, you actually hit on the point there perfectly, because you bought that line when they told you that in Skyrim, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
But it's a very different game, but it's basically the same thing. When you throw the MMO element in it just kind of shatters that illusion.
Yeah.
And until someone learns to cast that spell on people, I don't think you can do MMOs, at least not in that. They can't just be big online RPGs. They have to be something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have not gotten to play Second Chance Heroes. I tasked Spencer playing that because he has an iOS device and I don't, and then he couldn't be here. But like how on the whole, like how the controls on the iOS, how did you work with that?
Yeah, it's obviously it was a bit. We made it was obviously a PC game first, so retrofitting it in there was a bit of a challenge. We'd always supported the Xbox controller on PC, which made it easier because it's essentially the same thing in a weird way. So we just went with the dual thumbsticks. Your left side, you have a virtual thumbstick. It drives you. Your right side, you shoot your gun or whatever it is you happen to have. Then we did virtual buttons above the thumbsticks. It's a little clunky because it's, you can't feel them. You have to just kind of guess where they are and hit them. But it seemed to work pretty well. Actually, I was surprised. The thing that surprised me the most when we converted it was how well it worked on the iPhone. I thought there was no chance in hell this would make any sense on the iPhone because we've got like 8 buttons and 2 sticks and, all this chaos going on. But I actually prefer it on the phone, personally. When I play on the phone because I don't know why. Actually, I have no idea why it works. Maybe it's because everything's closer together or something. But so that was the trick. It's very similar to doing it for an Xbox when you do that thumbstick stuff. Now, we didn't, unfortunately, either time and just because of the style of game have chance to do all the like swipey motion stuff that iPhones are really built for. Obviously our game is kind of a port to the phone. That stuff can be really cool. It's just there's nothing worse than a game where it kind of forces it into a place where it really shouldn't be. Like I think I read a review of how they were using the PlayStation 4 swipe motion thing in Thief and how it was super annoying. So that's what made me buy it on PC instead of on PlayStation, because clearly they were like, we have to use this feature, we're going to put it in somehow. And so we talked about like swiping to open doors and things like that, but it all seemed kind of just tacked in there. So rather than just tack it in there, we just decided to go with the traditional layout of the controls and leave it at that.
That's interesting because I do sometimes wonder, the new technology is always very appealing, I can imagine, for game developers, but it also, like trying to teach any old dog a new trick seems troublesome at times. Did you face any decisions where you're like, okay, we want to tap into something, but we don't want to make people mad that we're trying to get? I mean, is there anything that you've added new in the game that you felt people might not pick up on very well?
There's been a few things, actually. Our game does differently that people don't get or don't get immediately, and I think that's one of our challenges in making it was educating them to these features because they make the game so much more fun. For example, you take two characters into a level in our game and you can swap back and forth like a tag team in wrestling. There's not much precedent for that unless you go really far back. So when I watch a new person play, like at a show or something, they just play one character and then they sometimes get killed and they don't understand that there's, the levels are actually balanced to some extent for the idea that you have two characters. You have another one in your backpack. So you can get out, certain encounters make more sense with one character or the other. And the button's right there. It flashes, it should be obvious. You picked two people when you went in, so maybe you'll catch that. But for whatever people are just trained with this style of game, and that is just a weird wrinkle on it that people do not necessarily get. Now, once they get it, it's great. You see them forming strategies with themselves. Like, I'll jump in with Queen Elizabeth, and I'll drop the flag down, and the flag is an object that, a totem of healing, basically. And then I'll jump back to the other character who is kind of low on health and heal them up. Just a simple little strategy you can do with yourself. And so once they get it, it's great. But watching them at first when people don't necessarily notice these features is, it can be a little frustrating when you're like, if you just press this button, you'd win.
And I ask this question of a lot of developers. Is there anything like when you're looking at the game, is there anything that you see and say that in particular is something that I added and it was unique and when it kind of fills you with pride? Is there anything that in the game that like makes you go, that's me, I put that in there and that's what I think makes this game good?
I don't know. It was a big project with lots of people, so there's lots of things in there, but and I'm not even just trying to be like nice about it. There are very few things in there I can remember exactly who came up with the final idea because it becomes such a collaborative process as you're going through. Like for example, the idea of collecting characters. I know it was actually our artist, one of our lead artists basically was the one who put us over that hump. We came up with the idea of historical characters because we didn't want to do another kind of character customization system people have seen 10,000 times. We wanted to give you a character you knew who was also in the public domain, so everyone knows Abraham Lincoln. So that's where we started, and we had kind of cast the game out with like 2 or 3 characters, and then you picked like the Queen or Abraham Lincoln, and we walked into another room, and the lead artist was like, no, I want to collect them, because he'd been playing Skylanders or something, right? So that was where the idea of having lots of them came from.
Yeah.
So this actually isn't me, but in that case, that's one of the few I can actually pin down to a person. That game, we worked on it for so long with so many different people working on it, it's tough to look at just one thing and say you did that.
Yeah. Also, if anyone is interested, Dana has some keys to give away if you are interested in trying out Second Chance Heroes on iOS. Toss us an email at coreelementsshow@gmail.com and let us know how you like the show or anybody you would like to hear, and we'll get a key that'll let you skip the 99 cents that iOS cruelly charges to help fund this company make money doing what they're doing. So anyway, Dana, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited to hopefully get around Spencer and try out the game. But it's been really nice to have you here, and I hope to talk with you again. Everyone listening to the show, I will be doing GVE next week, so we will not be having an episode. And then PAX East is coming up 2 weeks after that, and the odds of me finding a guest for the week before PAX East are really slim. I will still try, but let's be realistic here. It's PAX. So it might be a little while before we have another episode, but if I can get one together, I will. In the meantime, toss us an email, let us know what you think of the show, and leave iTunes reviews. I cannot tell you enough how much those iTunes reviews help promote the show, and we will see you soon. You've been listening to Core Elements, exploring gaming one element at a time, a listener-supported podcast. See the show notes or get more information at coreelementshow.com or leave us a voicemail at 256-763-0455.